Welcome to Journeys Beyond with Shamarie, a podcast where we explore dreams, energy, and the unseen worlds that shape our lives. I'm Shamarie, and I'm so glad that you're here. Today I want to talk about that special kind of crazy-making moment when you're told you're fine, everything is normal, while your body is screaming, I'm absolutely not. If you've ever walked out of an appointment thinking, well, the tests say I'm fine, but I don't feel fine, this one is for you. So welcome back to Journeys and Beyond with Shamarie. Last week we talked about laughter, Bob, and how humour can be medicine for the nervous system, especially around the parts of our lives we've been taught not to talk about. Today we're shifting the lens a little, but staying with the same bigger theme. The stories we've been told about women's bodies and what happens when we start to question them. Because so many of the women who find their way to me have already walked a long, exhausting road through the medical system. They've had the blood tests, they've had the scans, they've tried the medications, they've been told everything looks normal, or this is just what happens at your age, or maybe you're just a bit stressed. And somewhere inside, another part of you is saying, no, something is out of place. Something wants to be heard. I want to be very clear right at the beginning. I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-doctor. I'm deeply grateful for emergency care, for skilled surgeons, the antibiotics, for all the ways modern medicine saves lives every day. What I am into is pro-whole story. I care about the parts of the story that don't always fit neatly into the test results and 10-minute consultations. The parts that live in your tissues, your field, your history, your lineage. And to make sense of why so many women feel dismissed, not believed, or labelled too much when they talk about their bodies. We need to take a very quick, gentle tour through the history of something called hysteria. So let's talk about hysteria, not as an insult, but as a diagnosis that shaped centuries of how women were treated. For a long time in Western medicine, there was the idea that the root of many women's problems was their womb. The word hysteria actually comes from the Greek word hystera, which means womb, and from that one word an entire category of female problems was created. If a woman was too emotional, hysteria. Too sad, too angry, too anxious, hysteria. If she had a mysterious pains no one could explain, fainting spells, headaches, dizziness, or what we might call trauma responses or nervous system overwhelm, it was often hysteria. There was even a belief that the wandering womb myth that the uterus could move around the body causing chaos. So if you were in pain or behaving in ways that weren't considered appropriate or ladylike, your womb was the culprit. Too much desire, too little desire, too outspoken, too quiet and withdrawn. It could all be folded into this incredibly vague diagnosis of hysteria. And because the womb was blamed, one of the so-called cures was to remove it. Imagine that. We're living in a system where your emotions, your grief, your rage are being boxed in. Your very understandable responses to the conditions of your life are all interpreted as evidence that your body, your womb, your femaleness is the problem. Now I want to pause here for a quick language note because it matters. When I talk about hysteria, wombs and women's bodies today, I'm speaking mostly to the experience of midlife women who are raised and treated as female in medical systems. At the same time, I want to honour that not all women have wombs and not everyone with a womb is a woman. Genders, bodies and identities are much more complex than those old boxes allow. So when I use the word woman in this episode, please hear it as a shorthand for a much more diverse group of people whose bodies have been read and treated as female in these systems. So let's go back to hysteria. There was also early treatments that in a very sideways way bring us back to Bob. Some doctors prescribed what we might now recognise as proto-devices forms of stimulation as medical procedure to calm or manage women's symptoms. So on one level, the body is pathologized. I can't say pathology. You are too much, your womb is the problem. On the other level, the very same body has been used, touched, intervened with, but not necessarily honoured or understood. The reason I'm bringing this up isn't just to give you a history lecture, it's to say this stuff is not far from the past. The language might have changed. We don't stay hysteria in the same way anymore, but the field of it, the emotional and cultural residue, still lingers. It shows up when a woman is told her pain is just anxiety. It shows up when her symptoms are minimised as just hormones or just perimenopause or menopause without anyone asking what her life has actually been like. It shows up when she's treated as a problem to be managed rather than a person whose body might be making a very intelligent kind of sense. And that brings us to the heart of what I wanted to explore today. What if, instead of what's wrong with me, we started from the place that my body makes sense? From what's wrong with me to my body makes sense. Wow, just feel that phrase for a moment. My body makes sense? You don't have to believe it yet, and you don't have to know how it makes sense. Just notice what happens in your system when you hear those words. For many of us, the default question has been, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my hormones? What's wrong with my mood? What's wrong with my energy, my weight, my libido, my sleep, my digestion? We absorb that question from everywhere, from advertising, from diet culture, from rushed appointments, from spiritual spaces that tell us our bodies are just vehicles to our soul. But what if your body wasn't wrong? What if your symptoms, your sensations, even your stuckness were forms of communication? Not pleasant, not easy, not what you would have chosen, but meaningful. In my work, whether we're using quantum spiral practice or somatic spiral system, biocynetics or other field-based approaches, I often start with one core assumption. Your body is doing the best it can with the story it's been given and the conditions it's been living in. That doesn't mean you have to like how it feels. It doesn't mean there's nothing to change or support. But it does mean we shift from my body is my enemy to my body is carrying information. We start to ask different questions. Instead of, why won't you just behave? We ask, what happened to you? What are you trying to do for me? What are you protecting me from? What old scripts are you still running because no one ever helped you update it? In that sense, your body becomes less of a malfunctioning machine and more of a very devoted, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes confused guardian. When women experience that shift, even slightly, the relief can be profound. Tears often come, not because we're magically fixed everything, but because somewhere deep down a part of them finally feels understood. My body makes sense. Doesn't mean we'll never seek medical help. It doesn't mean we throw out test results or ignore serious problems. It means we let our lived experience, our emotional reality, our history, and our field be part of the diagnostic picture. We allow space for the possibility that mystery fatigue might make sense in the context of decades of overgiving and never really resting. That random anxiety might make sense in the context of growing up in chaos and never feeling safe. That sudden rage might make sense in the context of a lifetime of being silenced. Your body is not a random disaster. It's a storyteller. So I want to offer a few simple invitations for you to explore this idea in your own life. Again, there are no prescriptions, just possibilities. First invitation. Notice your default question over the next week. Just track when what's wrong with me pops up. Is it when you're tired, when a symptom flares, when you forget something, when you have an emotional reaction you don't like? Just notice it. You don't have to force it to change, and then very gently see if you can add another question alongside it. If my body makes sense, what might it be responding to right now? Not what trauma this is exactly. Not I must find the metaphysical meaning of my left toe today. Just what might make this response understandable if I included my whole story? Maybe you realize you haven't had real rest in weeks. Maybe you remember you're about to see a person who has never felt safe. Maybe you notice you're in an environment where it constantly asks you to override yourself. And then secondly, shift from blame to curiosity. The next time a symptom or pattern shows up, see if you can talk to your body as if it is a loyal, if slightly overworked friend. Instead of, why are you doing this to me? Try something like, I see you. I don't love this, but I'm willing to listen. What are you trying to tell me? You might not get an immediate answer. You might just get a feeling, a memory, or a sense of this is too much. That's okay. That's information. And thirdly, include your body in your support plan. If you're already working with practitioners, medical, psychological, energetic, notice whether your body's own sense of things is part of the conversation. Are you allowed to say, I know the tests are fine, but something doesn't feel right? Are you allowed to bring in the seemingly unrelated pieces, the grief, the divorce, the pandemic years, the long ago losses? If not, it might be time to add someone to your support team who can hold that bigger picture with you. As you're listening to this, you might recognize yourself in some of these patterns. Maybe you have been told everything is normal more times than you can count. Maybe you've internalized the idea that you're just too sensitive, too emotional, or too much. Maybe part of you is tired of asking, what's wrong with me? And is quietly longing for a different story. If that's you, I want you to know you're not alone and you're not imagining it. The story of hysteria, of medicalisation, of blaming the womb and the woman still echoes in our systems and our bodies. And there are other ways of making sense of yourself. This is the heart of the work I do in my healing spaces, in the work that I offer in the quantum spiral praxis, the somatic spiral system, and biocynetics. We start from the premise that your body and your field make sense. We listen for the patterns underneath the symptoms. We look at your story through a lens of intelligence, not defect. I'm not going to do a big pitch here, but if this conversation resonates, you're welcome to explore these offerings. I'll pop some links in the show notes and there'll be more information coming in the new year. For now, I want you to leave with this simple possibility. The next time you hear yourself think, what's wrong with me? See if you can gently place another phrase beside it. My body makes sense. You don't have to be convinced. You don't have to feel it all the way through. Just let the words sit there like a small candle in the corner of the room. Over time, the candle can become a doorway to a very different relationship with yourself. Thank you for joining Beyond with me today. In this episode stirred something. You might also enjoy the blog that pairs with it on the medicalisation of women's body, and I'll put the link in for that as well. Until next time, may you meet your body with a little more curiosity, a little less blame, and quiet knowing that somewhere beneath all the noise, you make more sense than you ever have been told. You've been listening to Journeys Beyond with Shamarie. Thank you for sharing this time with me. New episodes are released every Friday, so until next time, keep your energy soft and your journey open.